Hello. Welcome to Yoga Talks Podcast. My name's Jay Brown. Thanks a lot for listening. We had a week off. How's everybody? I hope your summer's going good. The weather's been nice here in New York, and I've been doing some summer stuff, trying to implement some of the things that I've been talking about in terms of, prioritizing time and being more present with my family, not overworking as much. Did some of that yesterday. I went to Coney Island. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Coney Island. Sometimes it lives in our nostalgia more than reality. I mean, I remember being there as a boy with my dad and eating like fries and grape soda from Nathan's. So I feel like compelled to take my daughters there. I live here. Last couple times, though, I have to admit, it was more work and frustration and annoyance than it was fun. I was a little bit dreading having to go, but it ended up being a great time. The weather was super nice, and I had fun. I genuinely had a good time. It's a fun place if you can catch yourself in the right mood. And I was in the right mood. And part of the reason I was in that mood, I think, is because of this podcast. Once again, I feel like I have occasion to express some special thanks to the listeners. Those of you who were with me last time know I was in a very raw state, and I didn't censor myself at all. I just told you everything. And the response was quite overwhelming. So many people sent me notes, and a lot of folks made donations, and it really lifted me up. It really lifted my spirits up. I felt so grateful to you. And I got one note in particular that hit me so hard that I wanted to share it with you. It's from Anne, and she writes, "Hi, Jay. Just have to tell you that your podcast is what I'm looking forward to the whole week. 1 month ago, my life changed completely when my sister was diagnosed with acute lymphatic leukemia. Tomorrow, she'll have her second treatment. She's been so ill, sepsis, infections, etc., and I find comfort listening to your voice. I don't listen to the whole podcast at once. I take 20 minutes or so at a time, so it lasts for a whole week. Most nights, I fall asleep to your podcast and then listen again next morning to see what I missed. Thank you." Well, thank you, Anne. I can't tell you how much comfort I got from receiving this note from you. And I just want to send your sister all of my best wishes. I hope she's doing okay. I hope she's doing better with the treatments. It's getting easier. And to you, I hope you're doing okay. I hope you're able to keep your spirits up some and hang in there. It just meant so much to me that we could be comforting each other because you comforted me right back. So thank you so much for listening. Please hang in there. My heart is with you and your sister. And today's talk with Pamela Boll is a great talk for us to be having. I mean, at least it is for me, and I'm hoping for anybody else listening. The way that it came about is totally random. I mean, I get all these emails from PR people, like a lot of emails because of the blog and now the podcast, where they want me to review or mention a particular book or movie, or nowadays people reach out to me and they're trying to get somebody on the podcast. But often most of the time it's completely unrelated. I'm always baffled, like clearly this person's not really listened to the podcast. I must be on some list now or something. But sometimes I'll check it out and see what they're sending me. And some weeks back, somebody sent me a link to this documentary film, and when I watched the trailer, it really grabbed me because it felt like it was about everything that's been going on with me. stuff that I wrote about in my blog this month, midlife yoga crisis, if you caught that, stuff that I've been talking about on this podcast. And I felt like this movie was putting a finger right on it. So I reached back out to this PR person, and she sent me a link to the whole movie, which I watched with my wife, and it was great. It really spoke to me. So I figured I want to talk to this director. So it took some doing, but eventually we had a nice talk. And it was kind of mind-blowing, honestly, how relevant it ended up being. I had no idea, really. I didn't know much about her. I did like a little research, but, it's kind of random. But I want to mention, for those of you who did listen last time, I told this story about this moment with my daughters. It was kind of this terrible moment that still had beauty to it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you could go back, listen to the Judith Hanson Lassiter episode. You could go to the end of the outro. I tell this story about my daughters. Well, I just want to mention that this talk today was recorded before that happened. And in the latter part of this talk, Pam says a few things to me about children and about parenting. And it's almost a little bit freaky that she said those things to me only like maybe a week or two before that thing happened. So I don't know if the stars were aligning, but it's a great talk, and I'm real happy to share it with you. Before we listen to the talk, I just want to plug my stuff. I don't do a lot of travel, but some of you have been asking me, like, how can I come meet you? Are you teaching any workshops? And I actually do have some travel gigs in the next several months. So Sunday, October 23rd, I'm going to be in Falls Church, Virginia at the Yogi Underground. I'm going to hang with Christina Kuhn. She's been on the podcast. We're going to record again. And then on Sunday, November 13th, I'm going to be in Somerville, Massachusetts at Bowes Street Yoga with Ryan, also been on the podcast. I'm looking forward to seeing him too. So you can check that out. Those dates are going to be up on the website too, jbrownyoga.com. You can always find stuff there. And other than that, just very good news for the podcast. I want to mention that the podcast has got some exciting guests coming on. I guess the word's been getting out. In the past, I would send out some invitations and I wouldn't really hear back. And recently, I was very surprised that I sent out some invitations to a couple of big fish, and I wasn't even really expecting to get any responses, and I did. They want to come on the show, so thank you guys. I think that's it. The word's spreading because of the people who are listening and telling other people about it, and that's helping me be able to get more interesting guests to bring on. So it's a real mutual benefit. Thank you so much. And if you want to do that, if you want to help the podcast, a good way to do that is go to iTunes and give us some stars and a review. That's one way you can do it. You can always give us some donations on the blog or podcast pages, or really just listening and telling people about it. That's really the best thing you can do, and I'm very much grateful. So, okay, I think that's good. Let's go ahead and listen to this talk I had with Pamela Boll. All right, well, Pam, thanks so much for talking to me today. I really appreciate it.
I am happy to be here.
And I got to be honest with you, I get a lot of emails from like PR people asking me if I want to like review this book or that movie, and that's been years, and I've never ever actually done it before until now. This is the first time I'm ever doing that.
Well, what made that happen?
Well, the reason is that she sent me a link to your most recent movie, A Small Good Thing, and I watched it, and it was like, it so put a finger on like the most pressing kind of issues for me and my wife in our life right now. And then I was like looking back at like other stuff that you've made in the past, and like my wife's a visual artist, and we have 2 children, and she let go of her studio when we had it was just like so many things. I was like, oh my God, I think I should talk to this lady.
Well, I'm really glad we found each other.
Well, it seemed to me like you really were putting a finger on so many things that are not only pressing for me, but, this podcast is also often very specific to like professional yoga teachers.
Yes.
and kind of like the plight that they're facing and the changes that have happened in the yoga world. Like I came into the yoga world in my early 20s, like in the 90s. And like now I'm in my 40s and I've got 2 kids and I own a center, but like everything's changed so much with the internet, everything. And so, I don't know, it just felt really relevant to me, your movie.
I am happy to hear that.
And so, well, first of all, I did want to ask you a little bit about some of your earlier work, because I thought that was interesting. First of all, am I right in saying that like the first thing you did was produce a film about the children of prostitutes in India?
Yes. I was actually the executive producer, which is a fancy way of saying that I was a co-executive producer of the film, which is really, it means that you're the person who gathers the financing.
Okay.
So
You made it happen. You made the money happen is what you did.
I did. I made the money happen along with my my co-executive producer, who's Geraldine White Dreyfus, who's become a very big producer of documentaries because she has such a huge network of people who are interested in financing things. I personally was very, very, very glad to have stumbled upon that film, and was grateful that I had the opportunity to produce it and get it out there, because it's a fabulous film. I don't know if you've seen it.
I haven't, but it won awards, am I right?
Yes, it did. It won everything from the Academy Award for Best Doc to an Emmy. I mean, it's won so many awards, it's silly. But it was, it was truly a labor of love for the 2 directors. Xana Brisky is this very shy, intense, driven, but shy woman who came across these kids in this brothel community. Initially, she had gone to India to film women and came across this community and was so astonished by their energy and their joy and their curiosity, just like kids everywhere, that she was hooked. And I won't go into a lot of the details, but she spent essentially 7 years living in that community with those folks. So, I mean, she went back and forth quite a bit. But so, it's a very powerful film, and it's about redemption, it's about hope, and it's about the power of art and caring to make a difference in people's lives. So, yeah, that was my filmmaking 101.
And what did you learn on that project? Was it mostly like the money? You said you were the money person, but did you get to see the other parts of it too? Because I know you went on to direct after that, so...
Yeah, I had gotten interested in that film primarily because I wanted Xana to be in my film about women artists. So I had an
idea for a film already.
Yeah, and I put that idea on hold because her film and Ross Kaufman's film was so powerful. I just felt like we had to get it done. We had to get it made. So I think what I learned was, you never stop learning. I had never done anything in film before, but it wasn't so different from other things that I had done.
And what were the other things that you'd been doing before?
In the mid-'90s, I was painting, oil painting, pretty much, well, not full-time, but quite a bit.
And where were you? Where were you located?
In Boston.
Okay.
And I was also writing short stories and essays. So I would have some painting exhibitions, and I would send my stories out to small press kinds of things. And then I began to I started teaching at Harvard with a man by the name of Dr. Robert Coles, and that was really important.
And what were you teaching? Art?
No, it was a course called The Literature of Social Reflection, which is a very academic silly name, but it was essentially asking students to look at their own lives and figure out what mattered and what kind of life they wanted to live through the lens of novels as opposed to sociology textbooks or psychology or even philosophy.
Well, that is interesting, given your most recent film, actually.
Yeah, it is.
That's actually a connection there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
it's all connected.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, social reaction, that is such a pivotal time in a person's life when you first have to figure it out, like what direction you want to go in. Mm-hmm. And what's been hitting me the most, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of us, but is that, now I'm in my 40s and I'm kind of having to do it again.
How old are your sons?
I have two daughters. They're
daughters.
6 years old and 1 year old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're still deep in the mix.
Yeah, you are.
And so anyways, I get ahead of myself, but I think that it's interesting, those periods of time in your life where you have to make choices about like the direction for the next, whatever, decade or so. Yeah. All right. So then you did go on to direct a film in 2008. Is that right? Called Who Does She Think She Is?
Yes.
Which I appreciated when I didn't get to see, I'm sorry, I didn't get to see all the films, but I did read about them. And this one also, I mentioned my wife, and from what I gather was about sort of the decisions of having children or having career. And we know that in my house a lot.
Yeah. The question in that film is essentially, how do you do the work that you're called to do and still take care of the people you love, especially when neither of them pay? So this is a dilemma for women, but it is also a dilemma for men who choose to do careers in the arts, really, or in even teaching is tough. So, but I focused on women. And
I would just interject for a second. I would want to say rightly so, like, because recently on this podcast I had someone on. Her name is Annika Lucas, and actually her story, it's an incredible story. She was sold into a child sex trafficking network in Belgium at the age of 4.
Oh my gosh!
And then she escaped death at the age of 14, and then now she teaches yoga in prisons.
Oh, how wonderful.
And she's this huge, fierce voice out there really trying to address abuse of power issues in the yoga world and in general. And kind of the patriarchy that exists in the yoga world and the way men have dominated things in general,
Yes.
And so I'm this man trying to really, keep myself open and not be perpetuating these power dynamics, And so I did this interview with her, and it went great. I was super happy with it. But I have this tendency sometimes, which is so funny because I'm kind of doing it now, where I'll interject in these conversations and put some of me in them. And some people listening were really upset with me and accused me of kind of shutting her down. Now, I don't think she felt that way, but I could kind of see how it's different for women than it is for men.
Women are taught, and maybe it's part of our nature, to receive. That sounds sexist, but I do think that there's a huge strength in receiving and listening and holding a space for other people. And it's a huge strength, but it's not recognized so much in our culture as a strength. You're more recognized as getting right in there, getting into the fight, staking your claim. And I would say that there is a difference in the way that the sexes approach life, and that women are actually, they hold this space for receiving others and creating an atmosphere where you can have a very good conversation. So sometimes, we tend to get overrun by other people.
Well, I mean, it's so interesting because when this first happened and the comments were coming in on the comment threads, I got super defensive about it. And I'm like, hey man, I'm really trying to have these conversations and stuff. And I felt like I was being blamed for things that didn't have anything to do with me. But my sort of defense was, hey, she can interject all she wants, which is sort of what you're saying. I'm expecting her to do what you're saying, like we're supposed to interject and just fight for your space in the conversation, rather than a more, I don't know, like not in terms of gender, but like in polarity, feminine kind of way of where we wouldn't be forever grabbing for the space of the conversation, you know?
Oh, yeah. There's a different way of being in a conversation, and that is actually holding the space open for the other speaker, and truly listening to them. And sometimes in our society, that's not valued. So I'm not saying it's her fault, and I'm not saying it's yours. I just think it's something that we're not recognizing always. But anyway,
it's something that I've been really looking and talking about on this podcast. So that you made a movie, and then I'm talking to you now. Was how much of making that movie was like you just like working these issues out for yourself?
Oh, God, every movie I've made has something to do with issues that I'm trying to work out myself. Why make it? I love the questions. And I had grown up as a known artist in my little community. I grew up in a small town in West Virginia, went on to college and won some awards for both my poetry writing and also for my artwork. And so I got into the quote unquote real world, and the only job I could get paid so little, I couldn't buy shoes. Okay. I was still wearing my clogs from college.
Yeah. I know. I have a degree in acting and directing from NYU before I got into, yoga. So yeah. I know it's like, they're not
looking for it.
Yeah. They don't really set you up with six-figure jobs,
Well, and then
or any kind of retirement or any of that.
No, there was none of that. And my boyfriend, I'd gone to college with, he was an economics major, had been a good student, but not fabulous. And immediately he was making 3 times more than me. And it set up a situation that was difficult. But long story short, I went to work on Wall Street to kind of recalibrate that balance and to do what I thought I needed to do. This is back in the 80s.
So what does that mean? You were like a trader on Wall Street?
Yes, I was a soybean trader, soybean meal.
Wow. And that was because you're like, I need to make some money.
Yes, and I did not want to be somebody's slave secretary, which I had been in my first job in publishing. And I had not been paid. It was mostly women, and they weren't paid much at all. They still aren't. There wasn't a lot of respect, and I was really intent on getting a job where I had no secretarial duties and was paid enough to live on. And so the job I ended up with was for one of the largest commodity trading companies in the world.
And that's like a serious boys club, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It's like the boys of the boys club, right?
Oh, my God. And the first thing I did in that company was disputes, sort of arbitration and disputes. That was actually fun because you got to sift through tons and tons of data and figure out who was responsible for some shortfall of grain or what have you. And I was very good at that. And I was so good at it that they promoted me to the trading floor, where I was literally the only woman and the youngest person. And every single day I would walk in, they would all hush, be quiet. They'd all hush down because they were.
And that's like because they were like talking about dicks or something. I mean,
yeah,
like what? What were they? I don't get. Like
they were telling dirty jokes.
There was some really,
yeah,
just juvenile guy stuff.
Oh yeah, all guy stuff, and they would be joking with their brokers and. They thought I was there. They just didn't want me there. They were uncomfortable, and I was desperately uncomfortable, but I stuck it out for another 2.5, 3 years. Anyway.
Yeah, well, that's formative, though, I'm sure.
It was formative, and At any rate, I'm giving you a very long.
No, I like it. It's the kind of background that I'm always trying to get. Like whenever I want to look at something someone's made, you know, there's all this life that happened leading up to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm interested to hear about this, and I'm interested to hear about your choice to leave it. Like, so when did you decide I don't want to do this anymore? Screw this.
I was going to get married, and my husband-to-be was moving across country to go to business school, so it was just convenient to leave.
You're like, I'm going to go for love.
I'm going to go for love. And I was going to write the great American novel since I had been an English major.
And have you ever written the novel that you were planning to write at that time, or what was the novel you were planning to write when you were going to go write the novel?
Oh, well, no, I never wrote it.
I mean, I've been trying to write a novel forever. So it's like a personal question of mine.
Right.
I mean, I keep writing at it, but I write these 800-word blog posts every month for like almost 10 years now, right? But like to sit down and do like a bigger or larger work, you really need some time, you know?
Well, I don't know if you need time, but I think you need
space.
You need something. I'm not sure what you need because I haven't done it either. I have done a ton of writing, lots of short stories, lots of essays, but the great American novel hasn't come up yet.
Yeah. But what was it? What did you have in mind? What was the idea for the novel when you were going to move?
The idea was that I had grown up in a kind of hillbilly small town in West Virginia and left with a lot of feeling of I'll never go back there. They're not my people. And went to a very elite school in the Northeast and always felt out of place, And it was the novel, I wanted it to be about coming to terms with that feeling of being from and embracing my, if you will, hillbilly white trash background, and embracing it, and yet, you know, living in a different place because I've never really lived in West Virginia again, but just, you know, coming to, instead of being ashamed of my background, I mean, I literally lost my accent because people made fun of me when I went away to school. So, you know, dealing with shame and then owning who you are and what does that look like? And so I wanted to write that, and I haven't done it yet.
Well, but I think those are themes that are expressed in maybe your movies, but...
Well, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right, so tell me again, where did you guys move to? You moved from Wall Street to where?
We moved to the Boston area.
Okay.
And
what year was that?
That was 80. I can't remember. I think it was 86.
Okay.
Probably. Yeah.
So there's a lot of time between then and the first movie you produced.
Yes.
So what happened there? Did you guys?
I thought I was going to be really happy playing do it yourself with an old house while my husband got this big financial job. So I was baking bread and sewing curtains and
you got domestic.
Sanding bookshelves that I was painting myself and was bored to tears. I wasn't really bored. I was just lonely. There was nobody in the neighborhood. But eventually I went back to work for a few years. And
what did you do? What kind of work did you do?
I worked for another business as initially as a writer. They wanted me to rewrite their sales literature. And this was a fabulous company. It's called Iron Mountain Group. And it's actually they do off-site record storage, which is a fancy name for anybody who has to keep paper records for 7 years or longer. They need a place to store it.
I know what you're talking about because I'm in my basement right now and I'm looking over there and I have a box of like a couple of years of like signing sheets from the center before we went into the cloud. I actually think I could get rid of them some now. I think the 7 years has been up.
Yeah,
but I know what you mean. I got some paper storage right here.
Well, and then we also stored, magnetic. Back then it was magnetic data. But the point the thing is that it was a very different business experience from the good old boys club on Wall Street because it was growing so fast. Huh. And there were only about 3-4 of us in the main office. So I got to do, it was sort of like, oh yeah, this is great, what you've written. How can we get this out to our customers? I'm like, well, I don't know.
Yeah. So you got to learn some stuff there, right?
I learned so much. It was so much fun. And
how could you back then? There was no internet, right? There was no Facebook. And
being the scholarly researcher that I actually found myself to be, I went to the Boston Business Library and looked up all these businesses that might need record storage services. And I wrote to their manager of information services. And I actually got the highest return on our mailings that they'd ever gotten.
See, that's like analog data analysis, like the aggregation, data aggregation, like...
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you learned a few things about getting money.
I did. And I had grown up in a small family business, so this wasn't too far from my own experience growing up. Mm-hmm. But then I got pregnant, and that was a good thing. We wanted children.
Yeah.
And I planned to go back, but when I had my first baby, I just fell in love.
Yeah. So
there was really no way to go back. He was born a little bit early, and my husband was working 50, 60 hours a week. Mm. So I stayed home with him, and I started writing again. And shortly after he was born, I had another child, and then I had a third. I had 3 boys in 3 years.
Whoa, 3 boys in 3 years.
3.5 years, to be exact.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy, because they were all real little at the same time.
They were.
Oh, my gosh. And you did that all on your own?
Well, my husband, obviously.
I mean, he was working 50, 60 hours a week, though.
He was, yeah.
I mean,
it was tough.
Because my wife and I, we trade off, and so there are times where I have to, run the ship completely,
Yeah.
She runs the ship more often than I do, but, it's fucking hard.
It's it's the hardest. Here's the thing. People think that having kids, I have a lot of friends who don't have children, and sometimes they can get a little bit, not to me directly, but with each other. I've overheard conversations where it's like, what kind of life is, you shouldn't have kids. The planet's overpopulated. Mm-hmm. There's all this chat. And it was the hardest and most powerfully important job that I've ever done. The hardest thing I've ever done, the scariest, and yet the most, it brought me to a feeling of deep sacredness about who I was, why we were here. And so I started writing like crazy, and I started painting again. And
how old were your kids when you got to start doing that again? Because my wife right now is trying to figure out how to make that happen for herself.
I hate to tell you, but I started taking writing classes and painting classes when my first child was around a year old. And I was pregnant with my second one, and he was born 23 months after. So I started pretty soon after I had children.
And were you just doing it at night when they went to sleep?
No, it was, God, I don't even remember. It was such a blur.
Yeah.
I signed up for a couple of classes. What I found out about myself when I was trying to write that great American novel back in California was I just don't do well sitting on my own all day long. So I found that, what do you know? There are classes just like in college. And I went to some classes and met this group of people. I painted with the same group of women for, it was all usually women, for about 15 years. And at that point, I had a babysitter coming in in the afternoon for 4 hours.
And so were you trying to work the art career or just painting?
Yeah. I was painting, and I eventually started showing and selling. Yeah, kind of in the art career. And I was also writing essays and getting some things published.
And so when does film come in? Like this first film you produced was in 2004, so when does that come into the mix?
Well, what happened was my friend Geraldine White-Dreyfus, who I mentioned earlier, she and I had taught together in the mid-'90s at Harvard, and she made a film called The Day My God Died, and I went to see it at the Human Rights Watch Festival in 2003, and I sat in the audience with tears streaming down my face. I could not stop crying because it was about sex trafficking and these very young girls, and she just did it. You know, she had no experience. Her cameraman was a boy that she used to babysit.
Nice.
And
that's
yet
DIY, right?
It was yeah, exactly. But she was at the Human Rights Watch Festival, and she had assembled a panel of State Department and a U.S. senator who was interested in I don't know, she's a powerful woman. And I just sat there green with envy, really wanting to have that kind of impact with my work. So I decided and then I met a woman who was a sculptor in New Mexico shortly after that, and she captivated me. She was amazing, and she had 3 boys who were actually the same ages as mine, but she had been working in art her whole life and had a number of very large installations around the state of New Mexico. And yet she lived on the verge of poverty, serious poverty, not, I need a few, I can count on my family. And so I wanted to see how she was, what made her keep doing this.
I mean, that's a lot of uncertainty to deal with, especially when you've got kids.
Yeah, and she had 3 sons, and her ex-husband wasn't that helpful financially or otherwise. So my question that was really burning for me was, what makes people go after these crazy things in the world that have some meaning, but it doesn't necessarily pay? So that film began with Maya Torres, but then I went out and interviewed 4 other women who were all working artists in different fields. One is a woman who lives in Columbus, Ohio, in a regular old split-level ranch house, has 5 children, and is the biggest earner of the group. She does clay figures.
And she's not in the city.
She's not in the city. In fact, my aim was to find people in the flyover zone. Or, my aim was to show, because I know this from my own experience, that there are so many people out there who are doing amazing work that are creating real juice for their communities with their work. And I wanted to show that.
Yeah.
I wanted to have that conversation. So one of the women lived in Columbus, Ohio, and Maya Torres lives in Taos, New Mexico. That's kind of an arty place. But she's 13th generation. So her work is very grounded.
She didn't come in with the gentrification.
No, exactly. And, it wasn't about some blonde woman. I mean, not to disparage blondes, but, she's from the area. And then Mayumi Oda is a Japanese transplanted to California. She was a printmaker, and now she's on the big island of Hawaii creating this kind of Garden of Eden, paradise, if you will. And she had been a very big printmaker, still is, actually. So I had a variety. And then there was another woman who was a singer. She actually was, when we caught up with her, she's in Rhode Island, and she had 2 little girls, and she was commuting to New York City to audition for Broadway musicals. That was her thing. And she was up for the lead for a Broadway role when I met up with her. And she and her husband were church pastors of a sort of charismatic Christian church in Rhode Island.
Wow, that's an unconventional story.
Yeah.
But interesting. I mean, so in that process of making the movie, did you come to any sort of like, I don't know, conclusion about this dilemma for women and what, and it's possible. I guess what I get from what you just said is that you saw models of what's possible.
Yes, I did. And these, if you ever watch the movie, or maybe your wife would watch it, I think you would find these women are powerful, passionate, compassionate. Their work is intriguing and interesting, and in some cases kind of crazy. It's a story of, I think bottom line is we're all here for a reason. And it's up to us. I think we have a responsibility to figure out what that reason is and to do it. And a lot of women have trouble with that because we think we should put our needs at the service of, our children, our husbands, etc. And that.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.